The gravel crunched under my truck tires as I turned off the old forest road and rolled down into Pinebrook Valley. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and distant rain. It had been 10 years since I last drove this path, 10 long years since I left my family's cabin behind to serve overseas. Now I was back, the deed papers tucked safely in my glove compartment, the name Ethan Walker written on them in bold letters. My grandfather built this cabin with his own hands. He bought the entire valley back in the 1960s, every stream, ridge, and meadow. After his death, the property had passed to my father, and eventually to me. It wasn't just a home. It was a legacy. As I pulled into the clearing, I froze. My cabin was still standing, but it wasn't the same. A neatly painted sign stood by the gate. Pinebrook Estates HOA, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I blinked in disbelief. My property, private under someone else's rule. I parked and got out, boots crunching on gravel. The front porch had been repainted, flower boxes lined the railing, and a new mailbox stood at the edge of the driveway, with the name, HOA Lot #12 inches printed across it. Lot 12. This was insane. Before I could take another step, a sharp female voice sliced through the quiet morning. "Excuse me, you can't just walk in here." I turned to see a woman striding toward me, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She wore a pastel sweater, designer sunglasses, and an expression that screamed authority complex. "Can I help you?" I asked calmly. "Yes, you can," she said briskly. "This is private HOA land. Residents only. You're trespassing." I smiled faintly. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This is my property. Been in my family for over 60 years. She gave a short, sharp laugh. "That's cute. You think this is yours? Honey, this cabin is part of Pinebrook Estates now. We manage all of this land. You'll need to contact the board before entering." "The board," I repeated slowly. "Lady, I own the whole valley. There is no board." That made her bristle. "Excuse me," I nodded toward the sign. "Whoever put that up is trespassing on my land. And I'd appreciate it if you'd explain how a homeowner association ended up here without my permission." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Pinebrook HOA. And I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Walker," I said. "Ethan Walker." The moment I said my name, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe even fear, but she masked it fast. "Well, Mr. Walker, we've had issues with squatters claiming property here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call the police." "I suggest you go ahead," I said evenly, crossing my arms. "Because the sheriff's going to have a real good laugh when he finds out the HOA's been building playgrounds and gazebos on Walker Valley land." Her jaw clenched. "You're bluffing. Try me." Within minutes, she had her phone out. "Fine," she snapped. "Let's see what the authorities think about you breaking into our community." I didn't flinch as she dialed. I stood by my truck, arms folded, while she gave the dispatcher some exaggerated story about a dangerous man refusing to leave. When the sirens echoed down the road 10 minutes later, I almost smiled. The sheriff stepped out, a familiar face from years ago. Sheriff Harlan Briggs. He blinked when he saw me. "Ethan, that really you?" "Hey, Harlan," I said. "Been a long time." Karen rushed forward. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here. This man is trying to claim property he doesn't own. He broke into one of our community homes and—" Briggs held up a hand. "Hold on, Ms. Whitfield. You said his name was Ethan Walker." "Yes," she said, exasperated. "Do you know him?" The sheriff turned slowly toward her, his face unreadable. "Yeah, I know him. His family's owned this valley since before you were born." Karen's mouth fell open. "That's impossible. The HOA bought this land from a developer 5 years ago." Briggs shook his head. "Not all of it. The Walker deeds cover nearly every square mile of this valley. Streams, ridges, and all." I pulled out the folder from my truck and handed it to him. "Updated deeds, certified last month." I came back to check on the property and found out someone's been selling what isn't theirs. The sheriff flipped through the papers, nodding. "Everything checks out. Looks like the HOA has been operating on false claims." Karen looked pale. "That can't be right. The board approved everything." "Then your board's got a big problem," I said coolly. "Because every fence post, road sign, and house you've built here sits on my land." The color drained from her face as she realized the weight of that sentence. The sheriff let out a low whistle. "This is going to be a mess." "Not my problem," I said, climbing back into my truck. "I'll be contacting my lawyer. Maybe next time, you'll check the title before calling the cops on the owner. Karen stood frozen as I drove off, dust swirling in the rearview mirror. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. If the HOA thought they could bully people out of what's rightfully theirs, they'd pick the wrong man to mess with. I was home now, and I was taking my valley back. The next morning, I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in years, birdsong echoing through the valley, the kind that reminded me of my childhood. But peace was a fragile thing in Pinebrook Valley now. Karen and her HOA had turned the place into a suburban fortress, complete with fences, regulations, and attitude. I sipped my coffee on the porch of my cabin, and flipped through the papers my lawyer had emailed overnight. Everything was clear. The deeds showed undisputed ownership of over 2,000 acres, including every single inch of the Pinebrook estates. The HOA's developers had bought fake parcels from a company that never legally acquired the land. They'd built luxury homes, a clubhouse, even a pool, all on property that legally belonged to me. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel Kim, called right on time. "Morning, Ethan," she said through the speaker. "I went through every file the county recorder has. You own everything from the creek to Ridgepoint Road. HOA's development sits dead center on your land." I smirked. "So what happens now?" "Simple," she said. "We file for a cease and desist. Every homeowner gets notified that they're living on private land under fraudulent sale. If the HOA doesn't negotiate, you can evict them, or charge lease fees for every square foot." I leaned back, letting that sink in. "So basically, I own their homes." "Technically, yes," Rachel said. "They're the trespassers." That was all I needed to hear. By noon, I was standing at the community gate again. The shiny Pinebrook Estates sign gleamed in the sun, surrounded by manicured lawns and overconfident homeowners who thought they owned paradise. Karen saw me from a distance and stormed down the sidewalk like a hawk descending on prey. "You have nerve showing up again," she hissed. I spoke to the county. "There must be some mix-up." "No mix-up," I said, handing her a thick envelope. "That's a formal notice. You and your entire HOA are operating illegally. You have 30 days to vacate or contact my attorney for lease terms." Her face went pale as she flipped through the documents. This says you can charge us rent." "You can't do that." "I can," I said calmly. "And I will. You built on my property. I could bulldoze every house here tomorrow and be within my rights." Her lips trembled. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled faintly. "Try me." Behind her, a few residents began gathering, curious and uneasy. A man in a golf shirt stepped forward. "Karen, what's going on?" She spun around, stammering, He's lying. He's trying to scam us." I held up my phone, displaying the scanned deeds. "Everything's filed and verified. My family's owned this land since the 1960s. You all bought from a developer who forged property records." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman gasped, "Are you saying our homes aren't legally ours?" I nodded. "I'm afraid so, but I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. I'm here to make things right. The HOA, on the other hand," I looked at Karen, "they'll be answering for the fraud." Karen's voice cracked. "You can't just waltz in here and take over everything." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what your HOA tried to do to me yesterday." By evening, the story hit the local news. HOA caught operating on private land, entire neighborhood at risk. My phone buzzed nonstop. County officials, news reporters, even homeowners desperate for answers. Rachel handled most of it, but I couldn't resist watching Karen squirm on live television as she tried to justify the mess. "This man is extorting us," she whined to a reporter. "We built this community." The reporter raised an eyebrow. "On land you didn't own." She froze. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office began investigating the fraudulent developer, who had conveniently fled the state 2 years ago. Every record pointed back to one truth: my family's valley had been stolen piece by piece through lies, and now it was mine again. A week later, I called a community meeting at the clubhouse, which, by law, also belonged to me. Dozens of homeowners showed up, anxious and quiet. Karen sat near the front, glaring daggers. I stepped up to the podium, holding the microphone. "Folks, I know you're angry. You've been lied to. You spent your savings on homes built on land that was never legally for sale. But I'm not your enemy." A man raised his hand. "So what happens to us? Are we getting kicked out?" "No," I said firmly. "Not unless you want to be. I'm offering everyone a fair solution. You can stay here and lease your plots directly from me at a fair rate, or negotiate a purchase under legitimate ownership." But the HOA, it's done. Effective today. Karen shot up. You can't just dissolve our HOA. I'm the president. I smirked. Not anymore. You have no legal authority. The landowner decides the rules now. Applause broke out from several homeowners. A few even laughed. Karen looked around, betrayed by the very people she'd bullied for years. Your board embezzled funds, falsified permits, and harassed residents who didn't follow your so-called rules. I've reviewed everything. The sheriff has too. You'll be lucky if all you get is eviction. Karen's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, Walker. I already regret letting people like you think they could own my family's valley, I said quietly. But that ends today. Over the next month, everything changed. The Pinebrook HOA dissolved under county order. The community signs came down. The fences and fake, private property, boards were removed. Homeowners who chose to stay signed legitimate leases and finally lived without harassment. As for Karen, she tried to sue. It didn't go well. Once the investigation proved she'd used HOA funds to remodel her own house and fake land records, she was forced to resign, sell her home, and leave town under heavy debt. One crisp morning, I stood again at the ridge overlooking the valley. My valley. Sunlight streamed through the pine trees, glinting off the rooftops of homes that were finally peaceful. Rachel called again. Congratulations, Mr. Landlord, she teased. The county just finalized your ownership under updated zoning. Pinebrook Valley is officially back under the Walker name. Good, I said, smiling. Now it's time to restore it to what it used to be. No HOA rules, no corruption. Just home. And as I looked across the valley, the wind whispering through the pines, I knew one thing for sure, I hadn't just reclaimed my land. I'd reclaimed my family's legacy.